Richard. It's very sad circumstances in which we meet, but I've been meeting people in these circumstances for more than 50 years of my life. The crimes committed by the apartheid state are never ending. Is this one any different, and if so, how?
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on and for your kind words. And I agree. I wish these were better circumstances, but this is something that we're seeing every couple of years. I mean, I grew up seeing 2009 war, against Gaza, and then 2014, and it's just every couple of years they come and demolish it even more. And on top of that, of course, as you very well know, the Israelis don't let Palestinians even control what they can, bring into Gaza. So they're not even allowed to rebuild. And this means you have like one power plant in Gaza, and now they've cut off the fuel going on there. I mean, this is really terrorism, and it's ironic because they call others terrorists, but look at their behavior. And the thing is, when we talk about 2009, 2014, what happened last year, May, what's happening now, these are, we have to look at the bigger picture now, because what's going on is that on TV, on BBC, on CNN, they want you to think that, this is about the Israelis fighting a bunch of Palestinian terrorists. Now, this is an insulting and a very simplistic way of looking at things. What's happening right now is that Israel is not happy about the nuclear talks resuming in Vienna, right? The Iran nuclear talks, because and it doesn't make sense, right? Because you would think Israel would like the nuclear deal because it stops Iran from having a nuclear bomb. It also lifts sanctions on Iran. Israel doesn't want that. Israel wants Iran to remain a pariah in the international community. They want Iran to remain isolated, to be under the heavy burden of sanctions, to have its oil and banking sectors targeted. And so Israel has a habit of sending messages, right? When Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, gives a very potent speech, as he always does, they reply by, bombing and killing someone in Syria. And now, because of the nuclear talks resuming in Vienna, Israel is responding. Israel is sending a message to Iran, to the world, that it's not happy. And when I say a message to Iran, I think we should be careful here, because just because Iran backs Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it does not mean that their resistance is any less legitimate, right? So that's an important point I wanted to say. But that's really what's going on here. You have the Israelis taking advantage of the resumption of nuclear talks to assassinate people that they have had put on a list for a long time, and to send a message to Iran. And what we saw yesterday, I mean, this is incredible. To take out one person, they killed 11 other Palestinians, including a 5-year-old girl, injured 75. I mean, they even published a video. I'm sure you saw it. They just bombed a residential building, and they published this video. They're so shameless. And then they have the nerve to call other people terrorists. And we have to shut up and support this in Europe and in the UK and fund this, right? The United States giving Israel billions, and of course, the mainstream media, the West, provide Israel with political cover and other means of support. This is disgusting. It's really something else that they have the nerve to do these things and then call it a counter-terrorism operation, or they of course use the Bush doctrine, right? So we have to go after our enemies before they've even done anything, because we have there was evidence of an imminent attack. I don't know about you, George, but I haven't seen a shred of evidence about this so-called imminent attack. All I've seen is the Israelis bombing Palestine, bombing Gaza, and really just being quite shameless about it, right? They even when they're murdering Palestinians, they somehow manage to paint themselves as the victims. And it's also ironic to me that the Israelis call themselves the only democracy in the Middle East. In a democracy you have due process, right? So these commanders that they assassinated, were they given a trial? Was there some trial that I didn't hear about? Was there an indictment? Who gave Israel the right to just put people on a list, assassinate them on Palestinian soil, killing civilians in the process, just indiscriminate bombing, and you know, fait accompli, we're just supposed to accept that? No, this is terrorism. That's what it is.
And is this connected to the never-ending Israeli general election? The current stand-in prime minister and his allies showing that they can outdo Netanyahu in the killing stakes.
Right, exactly. That's a very good point you bring up, George, because they have these elections coming up in just a few months. And of course, you know, if you want to win political support in Israel, just go kill a bunch of Palestinians or, you know, Iranians or Syrians. I mean, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. You know, the fact that this is some sort of political tool that they have. You know, that Lapid, who's now taken over after Bennett, he's somehow trying to, you know, basically win some political points by taking out a few Palestinian commanders. It's sick. It's really sick. And I don't think it's, you know, the names really don't change anything, because you'll have one Israeli politician come and another go, but the policies continue. And that's really important and incremental to understanding what Israel is, right? When Lapid was speaking yesterday, he said that we have nothing against the people of Gaza, he said, right? Israel has nothing against the people of Gaza as they pound Gaza. He said this is about Iran. He said that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, is an Iranian proxy. Well, let me put it another way, perhaps, right? Maybe I can suggest an amendment. Why not say that Israel is a European proxy put there to destroy Palestine? Because he claims that, you know, Iran is dedicated to destroying the state of Israel. What I can see is that Iran is backing resistance movements. But of course, the Israelis, being the occupiers, they can never talk about resistance and oppression, because, you know, when you say resistance, people will look, you know, they'll sit there and say, resisting what? And then you ask the question, who is the one occupying them? It's the Israelis. And we can't have this conversation. So they have to make it about some like simplistic, cartoonish, you know, depiction that, oh, we have good guys and bad guys. The Israelis are the good guys. You know, the British, we're the good guys. With the Americans, we're the good guys. And those guys are bad guys. And the ends justify the means, right? Whether it means bombing a residential building, whether it means bombing public infrastructure, which is a war crime. I mean, they're all war crimes. Whether it means doing that, it's okay, because they're bad guys. And the fact that they use this to win political points before the elections, I mean, I don't know what to say, because whether it's election season or not, they're always behaving like this. And I feel like we should also look at, you know, other things that are taking place, for example, in international affairs like the talks in Vienna. You know, this is really a beautiful coincidence that every time the delegations come here to hash out the nuclear deal, to get the Americans back in, Israel finds someone to kill, whether it's in, you know, Syria. They bomb Syria almost every couple of weeks, but they find some commander to kill in Syria, and then they find someone to assassinate from Iran. They find commanders to kill in Palestine. What a coincidence, right? So I think it is related to the elections in one aspect, but it's also related to the other things that are happening. And Israel has a habit of sending messages like that.
Finally, Richard, and I'm grateful for your time. The world community is, of course, as usual, struck dumb. But what I'm wondering about is the impact on Arab public opinion. I'm of the view that nothing will come to the rescue of the Palestinian people except the Arab public. And I'm wondering the impact in those countries that have normalized, especially recently normalized, their relations with the apartheid state. Are their public seeing these pictures that we're seeing? Are they seeing the little children being carried to their graves, entirely blameless little children who were murdered in a reckless, terroristic attack on one individual, no matter how many civilians were killed as a result?
George, it's scandalous. It is absolutely scandalous, and I can barely look at the images myself, and I have to report on them to inform others, and as you do as well, and have done for many decades. It's scandalous what's going on in the world in general. That the public opinion in the West is we know that it's controlled, right? What the media do in the West, the BBC, CNN, is they provide cover for Israel. Right, so I'm sure you've seen the passive headlines about, oh, it's militants exchanging fire, right? One threw a firecracker and the other one responded apparently. Just a side point, if this happened in Ukraine, if the Russians had done this, it would be front page news. They would be very explicit in their language. But to answer your question about public opinion in the Arab world, in the countries that are normalized ties with Israel, I mean, we're talking about basically Saudi Arabia, not officially yet, but almost. They opened their airspace up to the Israelis a few weeks ago. But Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates, I mean, in the UAE, if I'm not mistaken, about 80% of the population are foreigners. So, public opinion there is going to be mixed, of course. But when it comes to Bahrain, I recall that, ironically, Lapid, who's now the prime minister, he was the foreign minister, and when he visited Bahrain, right, they had the first, this clown show, this absolute circus, this mockery of a state visit, a so-called state visit by the Israelis to Bahrain. The Bahrainis came out and they protested because the people are not in favor of this. And they see the images, George. They know what's going on and what has been going on for decades. They know the truth. And, this idea that, Palestinians are terrorists and the ends justify the means and you can massacre no matter how many Palestinian civilians, this is a fairy tale that only works in the West. The rest of the world, specifically the Arab world, they know exactly what's going on. I can tell you in Morocco, for example, the Israeli diplomats there could not even find an apartment to settle in because the Moroccans refused to let any of their houses, their apartments to the Israelis. And that speaks volumes. And you see the disconnect between what the Moroccan government, the Bahraini government are doing and what their people feel. And so I have no doubt whatsoever, and I know, and I see that the public opinion in the Arab world is people are enraged. They have been enraged for 70 years because this is it's just brutal colonialism. And they try to market it as some sort of counter-terrorism while committing terrorism. I mean, it beggars belief, and I'm really appalled by this and angered. And you cannot look at this and not be angered. I think Nasrallah said those similar words yesterday. I'm paraphrasing, but he said no honest person can look at what's happening in Palestine and not condemn this. And so, Nasrallah, I can tell you that when he speaks, almost every family in Syria, in Lebanon is tuned in and beyond. He speaks for a lot of the people there. And, his impassioned speech last night really said it all. And I think that phrase stuck out. And one thing that is also important to note is that the Yemeni resistance, the Iraqi resistance, the Lebanese resistance, Hezbollah, they have all come out and said, we are ready to help the Palestinians in any means necessary, in anything they need. We are ready to step up to the plate. And Syria, of course, is the headquarters for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Syria, it's been mixed over the years, in the last 70 years, but Syria, one of the reasons it's been attacked by the West for the last 10 years is precisely because it supports the resistance, because it supports Hamas, because it supports Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and so on. And that's one of the reasons Syria is paying the price for what's happening there. But I want to just say that there's a unified front. The resistance from Iran to Yemen is ready to step up to the plate and has been and will continue to support the people of Palestine.
Richard Medhurst, as always, thank you very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.